Traffic and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Jim Iuorio, we've got to get to early today, 6:06, because he's going to make a killing with all this volatility, to be sure.
Right.
Or he's going to get killed, but he's too good to get killed, so he's going to make a killing. And plus, he's already cornered the market in gold, so what does it matter if he loses a little money? But before we do that, I did promise Frank, our in-house historian, because I think he's got a point to make that will set up something perfectly, and he doesn't even know it. That's how good he is. Frank from Arlington Heights, go ahead. You're in Chicago's Morning Answer.
Thanks for taking my call. So here's the thing. We all can admit that free markets are better. There's a supply and demand curve there. If the governments don't intervene, that's best, because those curves are always changing. They're always changing their slope. There's different things that happen all the time in the market. But if other governments are, let's assume our government is less corrupt than other governments in the world, and if other governments are manipulating things through currency manipulation, through all their tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, and we allow our internal structure of our economy to deteriorate, if indeed we've had 90,000 factories, basically shut down in this country over the last 30, 40 years, isn't it really the duty, if we want to have a government of, by, and for the people, for our government to take actions to be able to restore that? And if that involves, we want to develop our own internal trade network. Isn't that better if the rest of the world is manipulating stuff in the manner that is destructive to our economy? Isn't it the responsibility of our government to do something about that, to develop our own internal markets?
It's a great question. Thank you for that, Frank. Appreciate it. I wish we had more time to dissect it. Perhaps a commentary next week in Frank's in-depth history. I'm going to cede my time on that, ultimately to Jim Iuorio, but first to Art Laffer. Laffer and Kudlow had a really good exchange this week on Kudlow's show. And Laffer made the point that we haven't discussed enough.
What's that?
To Frank's point about internal markets, internal trade. What about trade in this country? And also, what really is the state of manufacturing in this country? We talk about it nationwide, but is it a nationwide problem? Or is it a problem in some states, Rust Belt states, and not so much a problem in other states?
When I look at manufacturing in the U.S. and how we've been losing it, it's not China's fault or the rest of the world's fault. We should be looking in the mirror. The problem, as Pogo said, it's us. If you look at the manufacturing states like Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Wisconsin, they're all the highest tax states in the nation. Who wants to locate a new factory in Detroit? No one. It's forced union. It's all these things. The taxes there are terrible. We don't have any problem with manufacturing here in Tennessee. Believe me when I tell you, they're all coming here. The problem is our states are pushing manufacturing out of this country and away because of their very bad policies. If we had good economic policies in the U.S. at the state and local level, as well as Trumponomics on the federal level, we'd have manufacturing coming to this country by the barrel. I mean, it would be amazing.
What about that, Jim Iuorio? Is the fault not in our stars, dear Brutus, but in ourselves, that we are underlings? Jim Iuorio, host of the Future's Edge podcast, special contributor to Wire Points, proprietor of Brandt's Restaurant in Palatine, corner of the market and corner of the gold market. Go ahead, Jim.
So I was chomping at the bit there. I don't think there's any rational and reasonable person who would disagree with what Art Laffer said. And Frank from Arlington Heights is right, and he hit on something that's very, very important in this whole discussion. He said for decades, realistically, it's been since the 80s where we started to let China kind of play unfairly with currency manipulation, regulatory manipulation, and that is about the same time we started tightening the screws on taxes and regulation in this country to get to a point where it's very, very difficult to manufacture.
Except though, but I mean this. But to take Laffer's point, don't talk to me about problems with manufacturing industry in burgeoning places like South Carolina and Texas and Tennessee. You talk to me about it in the high tax, high regulatory states like Illinois. So to his point, yeah, Illinois should be a manufacturing mecca because of its central location and its natural infrastructure, and it's not because of terrible public policy. So don't put that on. Don't say protectionism is the answer. The answer is for Rust Belt states that are ideally situated for manufacturing to adopt different policies. That's more fundamental than some of this other stuff.
Yeah, and that will never happen if we have this collectivist federal government and lean towards federalism, and every state kind of operates with this implicit guarantee that the federal government will bail them out if they have stupid policy and drive business away. That's why I've always been, the states' rights people, this economy is supposed to work with states competing against each other. And if it wasn't for the umbrella federal government, as soon as Illinois started to do stupid things, which, by the way, has been a long time since Illinois started to do stupid things, their next-door neighbor would say, you know what, there's an opportunity. But as long as the federal government has its hand in everything, then that kind of discourages that sort of behavior. But I did want to get back to a point that Frank made, which I think is the crux of the whole situation we're in now. We've let them do this, the world do this to us on trade policy for decades, probably 40 years. We're trying to fix. Donald Trump thinks he's got 2 years to fix this before the midterm election. I personally think that's where the whole problem lies. This is realistically, to not disturb markets, this should take 5 to 8 years to try to institute new trade policies, and we're trying to do it in 2. That's where the rocky road is. And I've said the whole time that 2025 was going to be a rocky road, both economically and for asset prices. And so far that's been the case.
Well, what's going to happen with China? I mean, their economy relies on exports, and we're a huge customer of their countries.
So the rational mind would say that China has to break and make concessions. But we've seen this forever with these politicians, and they dig their heels in. And China doesn't have to deal with a dissatisfied electorate like we do. The only thing they have to worry about is if they really break everything, then there'll be hangings in the square, a la Marie Antoinette. And that's what they really have to worry about. So they have a little more rope to go with than we do. And the whole thing, by the way, this entire trade war thing, it's like an old Western where 70 other people are shot and laying on the dusty road, and it's just the United States and China, which was always the way the script was written for it to be. And even to make it even more specific, it's really one product that matters the most, and that's semiconductors. So that brings Taiwan into the whole thing. So the question is who blinks. China will blink, but the blink, I'm hoping that it's not going to be. I mean, when you have trade wars like this, it is not that uncommon for it to start to erupt and percolate into something more than just a trade war. I'm not saying that anyone's going to war. I'm just saying we're opening the door to geopolitical risk with Taiwan and semiconductor.
Well, there's also something else too. I mean, for all of this talk about now we're going to cut deals and EU's going to go on a 90-day pause and we're going to reestablish our ties that bind to our allies and hopefully get trade deals that reduce barriers on both sides of the Atlantic and elsewhere. But I mean, this is sort of the cartel model. It's very hard to keep a group together. Just ask OPEC, which is one of the most successful cartels ever. But generally speaking, they fall apart very quickly because there's so much incentive to cheat. And you heard Bessent earlier in this week talking about, some dignitary from Spain talked about maybe we need to establish closer ties to China, and him warning them that you'd be cutting your throat because you're trying to keep it together. And we're not the only client state, if you want to talk trade in those terms, which I loathe because we're not a customer. I'm a customer of Walmart. I'm not an employee of America, and I'm a customer of China. I'm a customer of businesses here that engage in exports and imports in China, like Walmart, for example. So we talk about it in all the wrong way, which leads to all kinds of misunderstandings about what trade really is. But I digress. The point is, how do you keep all of these people together where China, we could be, at hundreds of percentages in tariff going both back and forth in a couple of weeks, and they're cutting side deals with these Western countries, just like we've seen with Russia providing oil and gas in the black market to Western European nations. There's a huge incentive to cheat. So the idea that you can bring this force multiplier and this group is going to hold together real neatly, that's a little Pollyannish too.
What can I possibly add to that? That was a beautiful rant. No, that's good.
Thank you.
You're absolutely right, and the Russian oil thing is fantastic. Because all you do when you embargo oil or you have restrictions on it, all you do is are forcing different avenues of the supply chain, and they white label it, and it comes to the world market. It just takes longer time. So really, you're hamstringing yourself when you do that. But how do you get other countries to abide by the deals we make? I have no idea. That's been a problem for forever. All you can do as part of the deal is to have inspection and have people on the inside and try to enforce it. But yeah, to your point, I don't know what the solution is to that. I was going to ask you.
So let me give you an opportunity to rant, because Bessent did this riff too, and it's one of these canards that just always rubs me the wrong way. But the politicians use it, so I know Bessent is smarter than to say it, but this is taking the House political line and advancing it. I understand. The idea that it's Main Street's turn. Wall Street had its run. Now it's Main Street's turn, as if Wall Street and Main Street are not connected.
I think that's a silly thing, too. And I think what they're playing on is this ridiculous notion that if we bring manufacturing back to this country, that all of a sudden, small town America, middle America is going to have these factories and people working on assembly lines. That's not the way manufacturing is anymore. As a matter of fact, we manufacture quite a bit here, probably more than we did in the 70s and 80s. It's just basically all automated. There's no more of these tedious, mind-numbing jobs on assembly lines. So that's not happening, too. Now, there is jobs associated with manufacturing coming back, but they're more, high-tech programmer jobs, construction jobs. But the real reason we need manufacturing to come back, or we want manufacturing to come back, is so supply lines don't run through China, which that's become a problem in the past, and particularly for things like rare earths and things that we need that could really hamstring us. And it does come back to the semiconductor thing. That really, if you shut down the semiconductor line, people don't even realize what chips are used for and how many in their daily lives are in the products they use. That's the big, huge deal. But, to think that manufacturing, and all of a sudden we're back to, small towns in Iowa being like a hub that people stay in for generations, I think that ship has sailed.
So then you saw, obviously, Dow futures are down big again today. So, this bounce yesterday is only going to go so long because the dynamic is still a precarious one. So, what do you see sort of over the next month or two, depending on whether, let's say, deals get cut with a lot of our allies, the big ones, EU, Mexico, Canada, but not China. How much of a weight on equities will a impasse between the United States and China be?
So there's two elements to the equity question. The first part is the macroeconomic fundamental picture, like you're saying. So now I believe that it's fully just about U.S. and China. It goes in one or two directions. One, they blink, or two, we really start to knuckle down and run supply lines through Vietnam, through India, and try to cut China out. We talked on our show, The Futures Edge, we talked about this with Vivek Ramaswamy about a year ago, and he thinks that's a process that should take about 5 or 6 years. So that's a long haul. Back to the stock market. Now, the stock market, independent of everything's going around fundamentally, this is sometimes people outside the market have a difficult time with. Market positioning oftentimes dictates moves. So consider this. So all of a sudden, you've been in the market for a couple of years. It's running. All of a sudden, you're looking at your 401k, and it's up and down and highly volatile and mostly down. You're like, okay, I should have lightened up. So then when we see strength like yesterday, you're like, okay, this is my opportunity to take some risk off. And now that's independent of the fundamental story. That's just people reassessing risk. And I think that's the next leg down in the stock market. I don't love the stock market yet.
So, this is the proverbial dead cat bounce that was yesterday?
That's what I believe, too. By the way, I wanted to add something else, too. I talked to a money manager, and then I ran a poll on Twitter. He said he's getting tons of calls from his clients, and it is split 50-50 about who wants to add risk and who wants to de-risk, and it's 100% political. And I'm like, well, how do you know that they're Democrats? He's like, they tell you. They love to brag about that they're selling because of Donald Trump. And then I ran a poll on Twitter. hundreds of responses of money managers around this country saying the same exact thing. I'm telling people now, because you don't like the president and think that he's going to destroy everything is one thing, but if you just don't like his personality and are going with what the legacy media tells you, that is an asinine reason to be selling your stock.
Right. I mean, short of the Chinese communists embargoing Taiwan, per your comment about semiconductors, this could languish for a while.
I think there's a definite possibility. I think my base case is that it's settled within the next 3 months, but that's only by a very narrow margin. I think we have to prepare for the possibility that we're there for the long haul, and we do want to reroute supply chains away from China.
Well, and if that did come to pass, then we have a whole new set of inflationary pressures on the economy, don't we?
Oh, there's no question about that. And China's the beauty of, well, not the beauty, but when China, when we tariff China, and anyone has tariffed China historically, they're very quick to subsidize the industry. So anyone who's like, when Trump said the other countries pay the tariff, there is a certain degree that he was right. I mean, China has a history of subsidizing markets that are tariffed by other countries. But yes, we have relied on cheap labor from China and Southeast Asia in general to live a life we've lived for a long time, since the 90s. So yes, is our standard of living going to take a little bit of a hit? Yes, it's probably taken a little bit of a hit to most people since 2020. And I think there's absolutely been a K-shaped recovery, but I do think, again, I don't mean to sound negative. I don't think the sky is falling, and I think 2026 is going to be a wild beneficiary for 2025 that's rocking.
What do you think about, I mean, Kevin O'Leary offered this prescription, which is sort of geopolitical more so than economic, but he called for, impose a 400% tariff on China right now because that'll put Xi on a plane tomorrow to negotiate a deal.
Well, I'm not with Kevin on that. I've known Kevin for a long time. We don't see eye on quite a few things. I think we're already being very aggressive, and Donald Trump is taking a sledgehammer in. I hope he succeeds, and I think there's a chance he does, and I know why he's doing it because we talked about the time constraints before. But to up the ante right now, I think that's a mistake. I think I don't know much about politics, but it definitely seems like you have to allow the person on the other side to save face a little bit. These are very proud, narcissistic people who get to these spots. I think it is foolish and folly to think that you can just back him into a corner and he'll fold all his cards and give you what you want.
Jim Iuorio, host of the Futures Edge podcast, special contributor to WirePoints, wirepoints.org, and proprietor of Brandt's Restaurant in Palatine. Jim, good luck as you go to war in the markets today.
I'm too old for this stuff, man. These markets are crazy. I'm getting grayer hair every day.
All right. Just have a burger at Brandt's. You'll be fine. And
Jim, feel better. I agree.
Yeah, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
You heard me talk about Relief Factor and how so many people enjoy a better, more pain-free life because of it. If you're dealing with everyday pain, it makes sense you'd want to try it first. Well, Relief Factor makes that pretty pain-free too with their 3-week quick start kit for only $19.95, less than $1 a day. Relief Factor is a daily supplement that fights